What is the most powerful trait we have? You need power, speed. Let your imagination do the rest.
Boxing King Media. We're here with Mr. Spencer Fearon in his back garden, dressed in a thorb,
Yes, that's right, sir.
which is looking dapper, mate, looking dapper.
Thank you, my bro.
Yeah.
Um, I can't keep up with you. You're always out jet setting somewhere, so you know what I mean. Keep up the great work.
We're grafting non-stop. So Spence, a sad, sad day for boxing. And I know over the years, all the times we've done interviews, there's always like about three, four names that you always refer to when we talk about boxing history. Uh, and one of the names is Mike McCallum. You know, amongst the three, four, the names Ezra Charles is another name that you always name dropping, etc.
Very good, very good. You're remembering.
Oh, no, it does sink in. I do kind of forget when you go off track, but the names stick. So Mike McCullum was a name that's always stuck, and obviously when you saw the sad news the other day, and I thought of yourself. So must have been a sad moment for you, someone that you've kind of looked up to, talked about, and obviously you share the same Jamaican heritage as well. I think he's from a different town though, and he's from Kingston, and you're from I forgot where you're from, but you're not from Kingston.
I'm from my parents are from Canada. Yeah, but I personally knew Mike McCallum, so it was one of them ones as well. Where it's like they kind of um, um, take you back, and he has blessed the fighters right quite a few times. He'd come on a podcast and stuff, and like we talk a lot. But like over the years, we built up a really, really good friendship. Um, because years ago, and I'm talking years ago, like 1987, he used to date my cousin. So that's how the link was. And it's like kind of crazy because I don't at that time, like in 87 in Jamaica, there was like because of you go to Jamaica and there's a couple of pictures that you'll always see in someone's house. You see the picture of the Queen, yeah, the picture of uh, of of Jesus or who they think is Jesus, and there was always a picture of Mike McCallum. Mike McCallum was big stuff. He was like Jamaica's first ever world champion, and he did that in 1984 when he beat Sean Mannion. And that was actually on the undercard of Marvin Hagler versus Mustafa Hamshaw when Hagler defended his world title against him. So we, yeah, Mike McCallum was one of the best tacticians that I've ever watched in boxing. Um, how he could create distance, how he could administer his jab to head to body, and then twist it into a left hook. And then, even though when he's being offensive, he's being very defensive. And that's very rare that you get those kind of things in boxing. Mike McCallum was actually a genius and was not given the credit when he was alive. He wasn't given the credit.
I tell
And
you,
it's weird. Pardon me, sir?
it's all right. No, I was going to interrupt you. Go on.
No, so he wasn't given the credit when he was alive. And it's weird now that now he's passed. Um, Everyone's saying, "Oh, Mike McCallum and this, that, bro," because that's just human nature. Um, and it's really good to give people their flowers before they die. And I'm happy that someone like Mike McCallum that I've given him these flowers way before then, because as a kid he was literally a hero of mine.
One of the things that stands out to me is the fact that obviously he was a Jamaican national, and when you look at Jamaican boxers, there's a lot of heavyweights and boxers in the different divisions that have got Jamaican heritage, where one of the parents is from Jamaica, but they obviously end up emigrating, so they're either British or American, wherever. But there's not many actually just direct Jamaican nationals that have made it big on the boxing stage. Um, would I fair to say he's the one that stands out the most?
He would be the one that stands out the most. If we to go back before Mike McCallum, there was a man called Bunny Grant who was actually a light welterweight, um, and that was in the 60s, right? Late 50s, early 60s. Bunny Grant was the guy because Bunny Grant was the guy that actually used to teach Mike McCallum. So he'd call for Mike McCallum to come and spar with him as a kid. Um, but Mike McCallum then he was just an amateur kid growing up. So and then Mike McCallum uh, won the gold medal at the 78 Commonwealth Games, and then went out to America, and he went straight in. Like his dream was a Kronk gym, and he ended up in a Kronk gym. And then they had some disparity, him and Emmanuel Stewart, because Emmanuel Stewart, the great trainer, should have given a shot to him to fight Roberto Duran in 1984. He should have got the world title shot against Roberto Duran, and he opted to give the world title shot to Tommy Hearns instead. And at the time, Tommy Hearns was WBC champion. And so from then there was that rift, and he left that gymnasium and he ends up going with the Duvers. So, you know what I mean? It's one of those things. But the key thing when it came to Mike McCallum is that he stayed loyal to Jamaica. Many guys go from Jamaica to America, and all of a sudden they want to say that they're American. Mike McCallum stayed true to who he was. Yeah, fantastic boxer. Absolutely fan. One of the greatest fights that you could ever watch, as far as I'm concerned, December 1991, Mike McCallum versus James Toney. That to me is one of my top 5 best fights for me to sit down and watch. I always study that fight. I always watch that fight. Mike McCallum is absolutely incredible.
Okay. One of the things that stands out, I'm not going to claim to be an expert on Mike McCallum, but obviously I've read up a lot on him in the last day or so. Obviously, I was always aware of him. One of the wins that I've always known about was the win over Julian Jackson. And I know in history, whenever people talk about the hardest punchers of all time, pound for pound, Julian Jackson's name is always up there. So before I talk about that particular fight, just kind of tell the common day fan, people about now who may not know Julian Jackson, who would we compare him to in the current era of, like, when you think of out and out punchers?
Golovkin,
So
I would say, but he hit. I'm saying I ain't got hit by either of them, but I would say that Julian Jackson was the hardest puncher in boxing history. He's got to be up there. Got to be top 5, right? When you think about great out and out punches, right? You would definitely call Joe Louis out and out puncher. Out and out puncher, say Mike Tyson. You say Deontay Wilder, but you say what caliber was his punching power demonstrated with? But Deontay Wilder has freakish power. Golovkin's up there for freakish power, but Julian Jackson, as far as I'm concerned,
Foreman Shavers.
Pardon me?
Foreman Shavers.
Yeah, listen, only Shavers in the heavyweight division, without a doubt. But George Foreman, definitely. But Mike McCallum said to me, I'm going to put this one up on the podcast as well. I'm going to put this out because we did a podcast with him about 5 years ago, right? But I remember speaking to him and he said to me about Julian Jackson. Like, Tundi asked me a question like, what was the power like between Tommy Hearns' power and Julian Jackson's power? And he said there was no comparison whatsoever. I said Julian Jackson was a bad guy. And the thing with Julian Jackson, when Julian Jackson was to hit you, he knew that he could punch as well. So he'd hit you and think like he'd be waiting for the reaction. And if you watch his fight, them two fought, I think that was in Miami when they fought. They fought in 1986, right? Julian Jackson was unbeaten, Mike McCallum was unbeaten, and they were challenging for Mike McCallum's WBA junior middleweight title.
I want to come back to that because there's some interesting bits I want to talk about that fight. But just to kind of show people his power, you've just said that you're comparing it to Triple G in the current era. Whatever people think of Triple G, he was like the Triple G of that era.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, we surpassed that.
Okay. And as you said there, in that time, Don King, he gets a lot of hammer, but he put on a great event that night. He put on McCallum versus Julian Jackson, 26-0 versus 29-0. And he was 29-0 with 27 knockouts. And I'm assuming it may well have been the favorite. And McCallum smoked him. Could have been stopped earlier if you look at the stoppage.
Yeah, McCallum stops him in 2 rounds. But this is the thing. Julian Jackson hits him, with a right hand in the first round, and Mike McCallum's legs dip, right? And I remember saying to Mike McCallum, and this is years ago. I remember saying to Mike McCallum, like, how did that feel? And he said, I didn't even feel the shot, but I just felt my legs felt funny, right? But he said at the time, because I was so fit, my legs dipped, and I thought, I'm just going to fire back at you, right? And fair play, because like he dropped him. He dropped him with a 2-1, which is very rare. You don't really see guys go like right hand, left hand, right? So you go straight right hand, straight left hand. He went a 2-1, and he hits him with a 2-1, and Julian Jackson goes down, and then he just rushes him. And a lot of people say, it could kind of premature stoppage, but when you're in there as a referee, there were hurtful shots that McCallum was letting off on him because McCallum knew, like, listen, I can't give this guy another waking moment because this is how dangerous Julian Jackson. Julian Jackson was a phenomenal puncher. We saw what Julian Jackson done to Harold Graham, right? Which is a prolific knockout, right? So you got to realize what you was dealing with somebody like a Julian Jackson.
100%. He went on, he beat Harold Graham. You know, I spoke to Dominic Ingle a bit ago and he talked about that night, and he's adamant now if they never took that point away off Harold Graham, well, the fight would have been a draw if they never took that point off him, but he still feels that Harold edged that fight. I'm sure you've seen it 100 times.
You know what? That was a funny thing because at that time when that fight took place, yeah, there was a BBC boycott going on, right? So we never actually had live commentary for that fight. They show you the rounds. This is how I'm showing my age now, right? What was that, 89, that fight?
But there's a really good 50-minute video of the full fight on YouTube.
Yeah, I know. I've seen the fight, but there wasn't any commentary on it. So they go back into the studio. And when they go back to the studio, I believe, I haven't watched that fight in such a long time, they had Terry Lawless, the manager of Frank Bruno, in the studio giving round by round plays of the fight. But we didn't actually get commentary on that fight. But on the reels, it was kind of weird that fight when that fight happened because Mike McCallum was my hero, but I also loved Harold Graham, right? So I was kind of split on like who was gonna get that win, but Mike McCallum did do a number on Harold Graham simply because he threw caution to the wind. He was like, Harold Graham, most probably Britain's greatest fighter never to win a world title. Very, very hard to pin down. And that Winkerbank style was so awkward. But and this is no disrespect to Dominic, because I like Dominic a lot, but seriously, Harold Graham didn't win that fight. I'm going to tell you why. Because Harold Graham was fighting very defensively and awkward, right? But Mike McCallum was the guy that was pressing the fight forward. And I think that was the thing that left him the lasting impression on the judges. But a great fight. But before the Harold Graham fight, I would tell any young person, 1987, I think it's June or July 1987, go and watch Mike McCallum versus Donald Curry. At the time, Donald Curry was just coming back from losing to Lloyd Hannigan's undisputed world welterweight crown. And he goes and he fights. He has 2 fights up at junior middle, which weren't really impressive, but it's still Donald Curry. And Donald Curry was still a pound for pound ranked fighter. And he was beating Mike McCallum quite handily. And Mike McCallum cold lamps him in the 5th round for a right uppercut left hook. Something that the great George Benton, the trainer, was teaching him in the gym. Was saying, listen, Curry's slick. And he was slick because Curry buckled him as well with an overhand right. And he said, look, we can get him by going downstairs to the body and fooling him, going downstairs to the body and then coming upstairs with the left hook. I just love studying the game. And like Mike McCallum was that guy that made you want to study boxing. And and it is sad that he's gone, right? It's sad. And I'm going to tell you why it's more than anything, right? It's sad that it's gone because he was studiously avoided. He badly wanted to fight with Sugar Land. He badly wanted to fight with Tommy Hunt. He badly wanted to fight with Roberto Duran. He badly wanted to fight with Marvin Hagler. And it never, ever happened. He didn't get those fights, right? He didn't get those fights. And it was more so because when we look at it on the Fab Four, do I think that he would have beaten Sugar Ray Leonard? I'm not too sure about that one. Do I think he would have beaten Marvin Hagler? At the time when he was propositioned to fight Marvin Hagler, he would have given Marvin Hagler a lot of trouble, right? But I don't think he would have beaten Marvin Hagler, right? But they'd give him a run. I do think he would have beaten Tommy Hearns, though, right? Because they used to spar a lot. And he used to deal with Tommy in sparring. Right? A lot of people say, oh, sparring, but I know famously he beats a guy called Braxton from the Kronk Gym, and then he beats Milton McCory. Please, you young people, 1987, early 1987, watch Milton McCory versus Mike McCallum, right? Watch round 8. It's one of the best rounds of boxing you can ever watch, right? So he beats those 2 guys. They were both crop fighters, and he goes to Emmanuel Stewart and says to Emmanuel Stewart, yeah, I want Tommy next. And Emmanuel Stewart looks at him and he says, here you go. And he gives him a picture of Tommy Hearns. He says, that's the only Tommy that you'll be getting. Right? Because Manny weren't stupid. Manny Stewart's own admissions, he says that Mike McCallum, he said, is the best tactician that he's ever worked with. So when you're looking at that for tactical boxing, Mike McCallum was a very, very really a great fighter, man. Just such a great fighter.
100%, and I think fans will hopefully, it's unfortunate, but fans will hopefully appreciate what he did in boxing when they research him now. Moving on, I just want to get a quick opinion from you, Spence. We've seen there's talks that Anthony Joshua's getting a new deal with His Excellency over in Saudi, and there's a potential 2-3 fight deal, and one of these fights talked about is DILLIAN Whyte. So that's what I want to talk to you about. Based on what you've seen from DILLIAN in his comeback fight, and obviously he still has been fairly inactive, but he looks like he's in good shape looking at his pictures. Do you give DILLIAN a chance in that potential fight with AJ? I know AJ will have been out of the ring for a long time as well if they do fight next.
I'd give anybody a chance. If you've got a heartbeat, yeah, and blood running through you, you have a chance. I would say DILLIAN Whyte didn't overly impress me in his last fight. But this is the thing, when you're dealing with something or like this magnitude, where you got a bit between your teeth, it's going to raise your game. What I do know is like DILLIAN Whyte versus Anthony Joshua will be a very, very exciting fight, right? Because DILLIAN has never really been a fan of Anthony Joshua. And even though Anthony Joshua wanted to play Mr. Nicey Nicer and everything else, Anthony Joshua is not a fan of DILLIAN Whyte, right? And at this stage of their careers, right? Because they are the old guard now, right? At this stage of their careers, I mean, two old donkeys make for a great derby.
It is a really good fight. Do you, in percentage wise, who's the favorite going into that? Because AJ, bear in mind, is coming from an operation, obviously a really bad loss as well. But DILLIAN's coming.
You got to think how who would be the favorite. Favorite is done by the general consensus of how many people are voting for you. That's how it goes, right? And then it rocks the boat and they say, well, then you're going to be the favorite, right? Sometimes you become the favorite, not necessarily because people think you're going to win, but people want you to see you win, right? That's how betting goes. And I believe that Anthony Joshua will still be the favorite going into this fight because even though he's lost, but he's lost to the higher caliber of opponents, even though DILLIAN Whyte did come up second best against Tyson Fury, right? But what I'm saying to you is like DILLIAN in his last fight, it was a fun fight, right?
Against Uncle Tete.
Uncle Tete, yeah. You know what I mean? I mean, I thought you called it Uncle Titty because he was a bit anyway, but I'm trying to say to you that. But
I tell you what, he's a monster of a man. I know Fraser made him look quite average, but he can take a beating, that man.
He can, but then you also got to look on that and say, well, then Frederick Clark coming off of that defeat against Fabio Wardley did a better job on Tete than what DILLIAN did, right? And because of that, then you'd have to say that then Anthony Joshua is going to be the favorite. But I'm telling you, you'd be a fool to write off DILLIAN Whyte because DILLIAN Whyte, when you know, like you're at the tail end of your career, you know you got a few fights left, and you've always wanted this fight because you believe that you got to beat another guy, that's going to make you perform a lot better. And that's why it's a dangerous fight for Anthony Joshua. And also, we got to take into consideration, we don't know where Anthony Joshua is mentally, right? We don't. I like to think that Anthony Joshua has eradicated all demons and everything else, but you don't know. The last time Anthony Joshua was in the ring, we know that he came second best in a fight that I didn't think he was going to come second best. So on these kind of things there, we would say like we want to see the better man win. But Anthony Joshua would still be the favorite.
Okay, interesting. That's it really. I think we'll I didn't want to talk about too many topics. I thought we'd concentrate on Mike McCallum's passing and another topic in, but yeah, so I'll catch you soon, Spence. If you want to just drop me some quick predictions for the two main events this weekend. We've got Sky Callum Simpson against an undefeated Italian for the European title, and then we've got Just
Callum Simpson, 9th round stoppage. I've seen the Italian guy fight. I rate Callum Simpson.
okay.
We're actually distantly related. It's kind of mad, but yeah.
Oh wow. Justice Huni, Fabio Wardley.
Good fight, really good fight. But I'm going to go for Fabio, and I like Huni. He's blessed the show as well, but I'm going to go for Fabio. Fabio's got different confidence right now. And Huni's not the biggest puncher. You're going to have a little bit more snap to keep off Fabio. So, but one thing I'll give Huni, he's got very, very good amateur experience. So I got Fabio winning that one in about 8 rounds.
Okay, and one of the fights I'm really looking forward to see if you can predict this one: DILLIAN Whyte versus TBA.
Yeah, I think TBA is going to give him a lot of trouble.
Okay, let's see what happens. But yeah, Spence, thank you for your time, and I'll catch you soon.
What is the most powerful trait we have? You need power, speed. Let your imagination do the rest.